Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We are back again with Vampire the Masquerade Swansong. So it's been a nice little wait, but the game is finally here, and I had a chance to finish it over the weekend. Before we get into the review, let's briefly recap the story. In Swansong, you switch between playing as Caleb, Laisha, or MM. Each one is a vampire associated with the Camarilla, a vampiric governing body. Someone has orchestrated a massive attack against the Camarilla, killing over a dozen of their members. Throughout the game, you unravel mysteries regarding the organization you work for, the group that is attacking it, and the personal secrets regarding the vampire you are playing as. With that out the way, let's start with what I liked. I like solving mysteries and performing investigations in video games, and I think this is handled very well in Swansong. There are several really cool environments you'll be able to explore with information littered everywhere. Piecing this information together and using it to uncover even deeper secrets waiting to be found in each level was quite a bit of fun. I enjoyed playing a Vampire the Masquerade game where you are higher up on the food chain. Nearly all the ones I have played start you as a fledgling vampire who nobody knows or cares about. There is still some of that here that we'll get into later in the review, but at least in the beginning, it feels different. The prince treats all three characters with some degree of respect, and other powerful vampires at least acknowledge your presence even if they don't actually respect you. Laisha's storyline is absolutely fantastic. To avoid spoilers, I won't say much more, but there are twists and turns, and it just feels great to get that deep dive into the Malkavians. I definitely feel that her narrative is the strongest of the three. Surprisingly, despite its many faults, this game has a high fun and addiction factor for me. Gaining stronger powers, completely clearing levels, and revealing new secrets provides a sense of accomplishment that was definitely enjoyable. When the gameplay loop works, it works very well. Alright, let's move to the aspects of the game I am neutral on. The codex is absolutely amazing. Not only does it track a lot of the unique terms and phrases you come across, but it will also update these entries throughout the game. Just about any time someone uses a word you don't recognize, the codex can inform you what it means or remind you who a particular person is. The problem is, it seems that nobody proofread these codex entries, causing paragraphs to be repeated in multiple instances. Also, there are some major characters who are missing from the codex for no reason. I am not sure at all what clan the sheriff or anarch leader belonged to, and unfortunately, there's nothing in the codex that lets me know. The music is mediocre throughout this gaming experience. I was disappointed by this, as Bloodlines has an amazing soundtrack, and even Shadows of New York had a couple of standout tracks. I can't remember a single time during this game where it seemed the music really brought the best out of a scene. There are a couple of tracks where it's clear they at least tried to do something, so I put this in the neutral section. The game prevents you from skipping dialogue until you have finished the current mission. If you replay the mission after finishing it, then most dialogue sequences can be skipped. On the one hand, this is extremely annoying for me since I prefer to read subtitles and skip voice dialogue if the voice acting is unimpressive. On the other hand, I understand this is a narrative game and Big Bad Wolf Studios want you to experience it in a certain type of way. Despite this, I still say letting the player skip dialogue they are not interested in creates a superior experience for the player and is the better decision. Finally, in my personal opinion, there are too many intricate puzzles in this game. I specifically say intricate because I think there are two types of puzzles in Swansong. Some puzzles require you to make a decision. Getting this choice right is based upon thinking through all the information you've seen, heard, or read during a mission and deducing the best way to move forward. There are several of these puzzles, and I think they are great and that they make sense narratively. Then there are the puzzles that oftentimes are coupled with little to no apparent information and have different mechanics you have to figure out to get past them. Sometimes they come up at very tense moments, blocking you from moving forward in the narrative. On the one hand, I appreciate the developers trying to switch things up and let you do more than just talking or picking things up off the ground. On the other hand, these puzzles felt like more of an annoyance than a welcome change of pace. I think the gameplay experience would be improved by reducing their frequency. Quick note before we get into what I don't like about the game. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate you hitting the like button. This information tells me which content the channel is enjoying and helps my videos spread to more people. I really appreciate all of the support. Alright, now let's get into what I disliked about this game. This list is kind of long, so let me hit a couple of points quickly so I can get into the points I feel strongly about. Swansong operates like a sequel, especially in the first few hours, throwing a bunch of jargon at the player up front and spending very little time easing the player into this game world. I think the developers leaned a little too much on people reading the codex, and this creates a poor experience in the beginning of the game. There's not enough clan representation in this game. Most of the vampires you talk to are Ventru, Toreador, or Malkavian, with a small splash of Tremere. Outside of the Tremere, these are all clans that were already well represented in other Masquerade games. As far as I can tell, there are no Bruja, Lasombras, Zemiskis, or Hakadas. There is one Nosferatu, but he's a more acceptable version of the clan and not the subterranean despised version I believe most people love. There's one Gangrel, but you would have to check the codex or pick up on side conversations to even realize that. I think this was a mistake and there should have been more clans in the game. Voice acting is very shaky in this game, and that isn't helped by lip syncing that isn't consistent at all. Honestly, I am not sure that the problem is the voice actors so much as the direction they are provided. Many times it seemed the tone was off, considering the nature of the conversation, and it's the voice director's responsibility to help voice actors get that right. Okay, now let's get into what I see as the bigger problems with this game. Swansong was marketed as a story about you controlling 3 vampires, 2 of which are well established in the vampire community. The beginning of the game somewhat sticks with that second part, but once things get rolling, it all falls apart. Caleb and MM are treated like peons by everyone around them, and it is narratively breaking. Caleb is 300 years old, making him the oldest and most powerful vampire in Boston. All the other vampires of similar age have left due to the beckoning, which is a supernatural urge most other vampires cannot resist to travel into the Middle East where human civilization first began. At the beginning of the game, the prince basically begs Caleb to resist this urge and stay to help her. This felt fantastic because it was such a huge change from anything you experienced in Bloodlines, Coteries, or Shadows of New York. The prince acknowledges you as a respected and competent member of the vampire community. The game does a terrible job of building on this scene. The prince treats you like a grunt for the rest of the game, disregarding your suggestions, forcing Caleb into an obvious suicide mission, and acting like he has no choice but to do it. It gets worse when you are out in the game world. Caleb struggles to convince humans, thin bloods, and even ghouls to accomplish tasks that he needs done. Even if you successfully complete these tasks, it will oftentimes leave him depleted of willpower or so hungry he needs to feed. It just doesn't feel like you are playing a 300-year-old super powerful vampire. I think part of the problem is Caleb shouldn't be interfacing with these kinds of creatures. Ironically, MM spends most of her time dealing with powerful vampires, while Caleb struggles with humans and thin bloods. Speaking of MM, Swansong's marketing presents her as a 100-year-old vampire who is a businesswoman with a strong place in the vampiric community. She runs 3 clubs that are considered neutral ground, where vampires of different alliances can come and safely mingle together. Consequently, the prince wants to use her as a diplomat to bring more allies to the Camarilla. In practice, the game does not present MM in this fashion at all. The other vampires do not respect her. In fact, the first time you use a skill, a relatively young vampire automatically derisively laughs at her failed persuasion attempt. You never visit one of her clubs, and they are only mentioned in passing. The prince does send her on diplomacy missions, but it's to vampires who don't know her and have never visited one of her clubs. There is no reputation she can lean upon to persuade other peers she can be trusted. It literally feels like she's just a pawn the prince has decided to use in this way, even though MM is not really qualified for the role. The game also doesn't provide you with enough ways to complete secondary objectives. The main objective can oftentimes be accomplished regardless of what upgrades you have chosen. Throughout the game, you will come across secondary objectives that can be completed for additional XP or to provide more information that helps you understand what is happening. Oftentimes, these objectives can only be completed if you are properly upgraded in a skill or discipline that you have no way of knowing you need prior to starting the mission. So if you don't have a 4 in psychology or celerity, for example, you are locked out of completing these tasks. This is deeply frustrating as a player and honestly just doesn't make sense. Why provide a large character sheet full of skills, disciplines, and traits if a sizable portion of the gaming experience doesn't let the player just choose to upgrade what they want? You might be thinking, so what? You don't literally have to do everything, and if you miss out on some tasks, that's just a good reason to replay the game. Usually, I would agree with you, except each character only gets 6 or 7 missions. This means you have a very limited opportunity to gain XP and purchase additional upgrades. Missing secondary tasks and missions creates a cumulative negative effect where you can have so little XP that it becomes difficult to ensure you have the upgrades to accomplish what needs to be done. Also, in my opinion, there's not enough variety in the endings this game provides. Let me be clear, there are a ton of different endings, and your choices do have consequences. But if you want the best endings that create a positive future for your character, it's basically required you side with the Camarilla. The marketing for this game emphasize that the characters are struggling with how they feel about the Camarilla and the prince overall. This, in my mind, means you are offering an experience where we can either side with the Anarchs and help them take control of Boston, or decide that the prince is incompetent and we should take over the Camarilla to provide better direction. As far as I can tell, neither ending is a real possibility, and that is definitely disappointing. Finally, I think this game is a little on the expensive side. It's a dialogue-heavy narrative experience where there's no open world and virtually no combat. Currently, the game costs $50 and is exclusive to the Epic Store. That seems kind of high, but since I do content, I bought the Primogen Edition, which gives you access to Day 1 Story DLC and some additional artifacts. If you don't purchase this edition, then the content can be bought for $5 a piece. The DLC story content was broken upon release, so I cannot comment on its quality. The extra artifacts are definitely not worth $5. I believe in supporting small developers, so I don't regret my purchase, but I do think the prices should come down to be more fair towards customers. Overall, I think it's obvious that there's a lot to be improved regarding Swansong. That being said, it's really nice to be back in the Masquerade world, and I enjoy the experience despite the issues. Hopefully more games based on this lore will continue to come out and improve on this entry. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.